Thank you very much, Stephen. Oh, that seems to be working. That's good. I'm going to try the free-form approach. So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me here today. I'm going to be talking a little bit about sort of the history of the music business and perhaps a few words of caution of what not to do in terms of how to embrace technology over the years. But I'm going to bring it up to date and talk a little bit about current business models too. But first, just a few slides about me and where I've come from. As you can see, I've not changed a bit from 20 years ago. That's me at the back. I used to play bass guitar in a band called the Sundays from 1989 to 1997. I then sort of went back to college, ended up volunteering for an MP without knowing who it was. It turned out to be him. And, well, we won't concentrate on that one. I then also worked at a think tank, the Institute for Public Policy Research, where I wrote this book on the impact of digital on the music industry. It's currently not doing terribly well in the Amazon charts at 1,493,000. Believe me, it did a lot better at the time, I assure you. It's amazing how quickly these things go out of date. But now, yes, I run Music Ally. I started in 2000. We're a publisher, we're an online publisher. The core of our business is people subscribing to information about the digital music business. We have 3,000 subscribers worldwide. And we do lots of other stuff too that you can see there, and lots of different clients. I'm going to highlight one of them, though, actually, which is of direct relevance to you. It's a project that we're working on right now. I'm delighted to say that Faber & Faber are part of it too. I See Tomorrow. It's a government-backed initiative to foster innovation in the digital economy through the creation of a purpose-built testbed for consumer trials. And the idea is it's a facility to bring rights owners and tech companies together to try out new digital business models. So any other rights owners that have not yet signed up to this, I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards. Anyway, on to today's talk. So yeah, I'm just going to want to sort of look back over the years in a more sort of qualitative fashion, though I have got the odd chart later on, just to see what we can learn from the attitude of the music industry, which I think can be characterized by really one word: resistance. Resistance followed by resistance, followed by more resistance. Once upon a time, years ago, the music industry was really all about sheet music. So in the 19th century, was obviously no such thing really as the recorded music business then. And then along came some evil technology which the music publishers thought was going to threaten to undermine their business. And believe me, I've actually seen the discussions that took place. I used to work at the Music Publishers Association, and I've seen the discussions from the late 19th century, which really did talk in very similar terms to the way that the industry has reacted to digital these days, thinking that the pianolas were going to basically put them out of their business, undermine their ability to sell sheet music. That's not actually a campaign from the time, I hasten to add. Then along came these. This ushered in a much happier period for the music industry slowly from the 20s and the 30s, but really when it was the 50s and it coincided with the advent of this, things really did begin to take off. However, there was still a little bit of resistance, actually. I mean, in the early days, the labels were actually quite concerned about these nasty things called radios, which they thought would undermine the reason for why people might want to buy the recordings. And indeed, the Musicians' Union and PPL were so concerned that they actually ended up putting a restriction on the amount of commercial gramophone records that the BBC was able to play, right down to just 5 hours in any one 24-hour period. And that held right through to 1967. And in fact, needle time continued to affect the BBC's output right through to 1988. It's kind of worth reminding ourselves of that. Then along came this, and this obviously is something that the older amongst you will remember. Music industry genuinely thought that home taping was going to destroy their business. Of course, it didn't. Growth continued pretty spectacularly. What they did miss out on, though, was by not having a copying levy in this country, we missed out on a lot of revenue that other European territories took. through compensation for private copying from cassettes. But it was the arrival of these when things really began to take off, the CD, and a lovely idea that you've bought all your product in one format, now you're going to have to go out and buy it again in another format. Everyone was very happy about that. A slight little problem that they didn't realize at the time, that they were giving away their inventory so that everyone could actually copy it and ultimately, of course, distribute it. Copying through these computers, and obviously being urged to as well by the manufacturers of those computers, just simple enough as put a CD in your drive, and there you have it. You've got the actual content of what was on that physical disk. Then along came this man. Anybody know who he is? I'll take that as a no. He's Karl-Heinz Brandenburg, professor from Germany, and together with the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, he basically invented this MP3. I mean, he's not the only one, but he's known as the kind of the godfather of MP3, the compression standard, which enabled people to basically be able to distribute music in smaller files across the web by compressing the size, because obviously at the time there was no broadband, so it made it a lot more feasible to distribute music over the internet and the World Wide Web. Along came these. I couldn't find the actual original one. I'm a bit annoyed about that. But anyway, it's by the same company. Diamond Multimedia made the Rio MP3 player. In 1998, it came out. Later that year, September 1998, the American Trade Association, the RIAA, tried to outlaw MP3 players. They tried to have them banned. And again, it's worth remembering, this is not that long time ago. Oddly enough, they lost that case. But they were quite concerned, of course, that what was happening there. I think they sort of argued that it was equivalent to sort of home copying, basically. But you can't resist technology in that way. And someone who then came along and entered into our story, who took things a little bit further, I'm probably a little bit more familiar with him, Sean Fanning. He invented this, Napster. So Napster was really sort of the first big file-sharing service. It stored music on central servers, which people could then download from. As such, it was actually relatively easy to be shut down by the music industry eventually, and they took it over. And of course, it exists today as a legally licensed service. But it did spawn, obviously, a whole number of file-sharing services, and the file-sharing problem, as you well know, persists until this day. And then another gentleman enters our story. Again, I don't think he needs any particular introduction. 2001, the entry of the iPod into the scene. But bear in mind that it wasn't until 2 years later that iTunes actually began to sell music. So these devices were around for a fair amount of time before the music was legally sold. And the music industry forced him into this nice little equation for him, basically. DRM, digital rights management, served Apple very well. It helped to keep people within that ecosystem, which works pretty seamlessly anyway. But the irony of it all was, while Steve Jobs was arguing against DRM and the music industry argued for it, it was clearly one of the reasons that really helped push the success of the sale of iPods and keeping people within the Apple world. All right, here's my statsy bit. I've got to give you some stats, haven't I? And obviously, as is probably very well known, over the last 10 years, sales have dropped. This is global recorded music sales. And physical decline, as you can see, is pretty severe. That's the yellow one, gone down to almost a third of its height at 1999 and 2000. And digital music revenues now account for about a third of recorded music revenues worldwide. In the UK, this is only the last 5 years, but we have performed a little bit better. And indeed, 2008, 2009, we actually had a sort of flattening and little peak, but back down again in 2010. And it's still going to be, I think, at least 2 to 3 years maybe until digital, fully begins to take up the slack from the decline in physical sales. How does that break down in terms of digital income from recorded music? Big problem is the one at the top, online single sales, because that's the one that's a little less valuable. What everyone wants to see is the next two, well, in fact, the next three coming up an awful lot more. I see others actually slipped off there. There's other at 6% for those of you that add up very quickly and notice that. So digital album sales beginning to increase, but still not really getting to the point at which they're making up enough income to make up for the fall in physical sales. But that's not the whole picture. And it's worth just having a brief look at this chart. This was produced by PRS, Will Page at PRS for Music in 2009, which basically shows that the live revenues, taken as a whole, taken in aggregate, and that's the blue and the green and blue at the back, compared to the trade and retail value of music from recorded music, which is the red and the green at the front, that actually surpassed recorded music revenues in 2008. These are projections from 2009, so these are not actual figures, but I don't think they're sort of too far off the mark. Anecdotally on that level, it's just worth bearing in mind when Coldplay released their last Viva La Vida album. It was very interesting to see, discussing with EMI, that actually the release of the physical record was very much secondary to the tour. It was all about the tour and ensuring that the release of the album just worked around the tour schedule that they'd already created at first, a complete reversal from how things used to be. So just some quick thoughts on reasons for decline. I mean, piracy is an obvious one, but there are other reasons too. And I think almost, perhaps, the biggest one is the fact that digital has enabled customers to cherry pick, to pick track by track, not be forced into buying the whole album. And what that has done is basically lowered the average transaction. So the average transaction in digital compared to physical is still, far lower because people are only just beginning to buy digital albums. The other one that are probably quite familiar to you is the way that CD album prices have been forced down, largely led by supermarkets with heavy discounting, to the degree that over the last 10 years, CD album prices in the UK have gone down by 28%. Right. What has the industry sort of done about this, or what have other people from outside the industry as well done about this? Well, they've looked to move digital business models on, and indeed, the music industry has and is obviously, more advanced than other sectors. It got hit a lot earlier on by digital. And I think what's happening is basically you've got a sort of a move from the left to the right. The left, a la carte, when you're choosing tracks or albums and buying them, downloading them to keep, is very much sort of similar. It's mimicking the physical world apart from this ability to unbundle the album. But as you move over to the right, you start to get to sort of more interesting services, which I think everyone hopes is going to be more of the future for consumption of music going forward. So you're moving to music as a service, not necessarily as a product. Music as a subscription type service where people pay regular money for access to unlimited music in the form of streams, access to unlimited music in the form of downloads, and often as well the payments coming from somewhere else, maybe coming from advertising, maybe coming from a product manufacturer who's bundling music with that device, maybe coming with a service provider like an ISP, who's offering music as an add-on. In fact, I'm going to touch on that in a second. So I'm just going to pick out a few key services that I think are sort of useful to note. I'm sure you're quite well aware of Spotify, but it is worth reminding ourselves it's done incredibly well. It's one of the first services to both almost make a go of the advertising-funded model, but certainly doing very well on the subscription side too. So they operate a freemium model. The basic service is free. You can listen to a number of tracks streamed to your computer, but with advertising, just like radio. But that really, that whole model has actually not worked sort of terribly well for music so far. Where the money lies is in the paid-for premium service, and they've now got 1 million paying-for subscribers across Europe. And they are beginning to generate meaningful revenues. And it's certainly one of the most successful subscription services to date. And one of the big things is the fact that you can take tracks with you on portable devices like the iPhone. You get rid of the advertising as well. But I think portability and that sort of added value has really worked well in terms of convincing consumers that it's worth upgrading to the paid-for version. But this one, I'm sure you're probably less familiar with, TDC Play. This is from Denmark. TDC is the incumbent telco there, like BT. And basically, they were looking for a means of distinguishing themselves from other providers, and something that would sort of reinvigorate the perception of their company, mainly as a tool for customer acquisition and preventing customer churn. So they did a big deal with the music industry over there. They effectively doubled digital incomes in Denmark overnight with this one deal, and they bundled in free music, a kind of Spotify-like service, in with the provision of people who are on a certain broadband tariff. It's been incredibly successful. They've had, I think one of the most recent counts was up to 250 million downloads and streams, which equates to 45 tracks per head of population in Denmark, and even claiming that it's reduced customer churn by 50%, which is quite an astonishing figure if it indeed is true. Finally, amongst the services, just wanted to touch on one that hasn't launched this yet, but is quite interesting. It's called Beyond Oblivion, and what they do, or what they will do, is bundle music with devices. So they do deals with manufacturers of smartphones, manufacturers of PCs, any kind of device that's connected and on which you can play music. And for a one-off fee, you will be able to access music for the lifetime of that device, okay? So they're taking a bit of a gamble here, basically, because you can keep that music as well. You can't take it off that device. That's one of the catches. But you can share music with other people that are in the Beyond Oblivion ecosystem. But it's quite an interesting, radical business model, which hopefully they'll get the licenses. They've just received $77 million in investment from the Wellcome Trust. They've got News International backing them as well. So it'd be interesting to see if that does indeed take off. It's just another indication of kind of, the ways in which business models are really changing in the music industry. More at the micro level, music industry's got an awful lot better at customer relationship management. It's worth bearing in mind that, years ago, no one really knew who the customers were unless you put an insert into the CD or the vinyl record. You wouldn't have actually have known who the customer was. Sorry about that. I added this on the train, so I didn't have an image to put on that one. I suddenly realized working with brands really has become a very important area for music. For instance, I'm aware of a case in France where Universal Music did a deal with a soap powder manufacturer, which really brought in a significant amount of their digital revenues that year, simply by allowing customers of that particular brand to access some downloads by buying the product. Use of Facebook and Twitter, I'm sure you're terribly familiar with. Music industry's got very familiar now with using these kind of tools in promoting their products. And down the bottom here, just sort of individual case studies. And I think it's interesting that, again, still the best two that I could think of were ones that really largely bypassed the traditional music industry. I won't bother mentioning Radiohead, I'm sure you're fully aware of them, but 9 Inch Nails, that one on the left there, album Ghosts 1 to 4, was made available in so many different packages, ranging from completely free for the MP3 files through to $300 to the ultra deluxe version, which had DVDs and FLAC files and lots of artwork and everything. They sold out 2,500 limited edition copies within 3 days. So you can do the maths, it was a pretty successful campaign. And this one on the right here, Pledge Music, which is a site which works particularly with sort of the long tail in music, and particularly bands that have been dropped or have an established fan base but are looking for other ways of monetizing that. And what they do is you set up pledges with the site, so you have like a limited number of places to a special gig or backstage passes, or right at the beginning, say, pre-orders for the CDs. And the average spend across that site from the individual users is £56, which is pretty impressive. So, lastly, what does all that mean for book publishers? Am I out of time? Oh, not quite good. Okay. I genuinely think you're in so much of a better position. I really do. The piracy threat is just not as strong for the book business as it was for music. Your inventory wasn't out there digitized for everyone to put onto the devices in the first place. It's a far greater ordeal to digitize a book than it was to rip a CD for music. The attitude of consumers, I think, is worth sort of bearing in mind as well. I mean, I think there was obviously, a great deal of resentment about the traditional view of the music industry in terms of how greedy it had been with CD prices and, everyone making lots of money, which didn't help when it came to sort of, launching campaigns against file sharing. So, I think you're in, and the timing is so much better as well. The devices are here at the right time. You're embracing them, I'm pleased to see. The catalog really does seem to be available. I'm quite an avid Kindle user myself, and, generally I'm finding a lot of the titles that I want to be able to download, which I'm quite impressed with. It took the music industry a lot longer to get into that position. The unbundling of the book is certainly not a threat for publishers. It's a tremendous opportunity, this ability to send sample chapters to people so they can see, do I actually want to buy that? Completely different from the music industry. You've got so much potential for new formats and products because of those devices. It's not just the fact that you can take a whole number of books with you on holiday and, getting over the sort of the weight issue and portability. It's also about all that sort of built-in search, built-in referencing, the ability to access a community of people that can, make references within the books, and indeed, with book clubs outside of the book. And of course, and I know you're already doing it. Books as apps, books that are using interactive multimedia, bringing in audio and video, and there's a lot more potential for you to exploit this going forward, and the devices are there to enable that to happen right now. And similar potential for new business models. In the IC Tomorrow, we had a contest the other day where we invited technology companies to submit their ideas to panels of rights owners, and one of them was a kind of Spotify for audio books, and indeed a Spotify type service for ebooks too. And I'm sure that's going to be coming along. And of course, you've got to be careful in terms of the potential cannibalization impact of some of these services. But equally, I would really encourage you to just try and experiment as much as you can. Look at these lending services too, and look at how you can strike partnerships with them rather than just simply resisting them. And working with brands too. I know that's complicated when it comes to authors, but still plenty of possibilities out there. And the long tail and working with niche parts of the business, there's controversy over the degree to which that has worked for music. But I think in the round it certainly has benefited those that might have sort of a few hundred to 1,000 fans who they can establish a direct relationship with. Well, the same exists for you too. But of course, you've got to prove your added value, which we've already heard earlier on, to stop those authors going direct as publishers, and those authors who want to go direct, you should go direct if you want to. But you've got to get better and show, you can prove that you know how to handle the relationship with consumers, get better at CRM, and ensure that there are good reasons why authors want to entrust their digital rights with you. Right, I've done it, I've got through. Please do take down my details if you'd like to get in contact with me. I'm sure I'd be more than happy to hear from you, and I'll be sticking around, I think, for most of the day, so you can talk to me then as well. Save me getting lonely. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.